So these are all BC sightings, eh?
The British Columbia, these two, that's Alberta there, Washington, Oregon, Northern California, various things go back. Well, it's archives back there.
Wow. How long have you been
But
doing
when
it?
you're pressed for space, you gotta pack things in where you can.
Yeah, totally. Thomas, how long have you been doing this for, man?
Since 1978. Yeah, 1978. I still remember my father telling my mother, don't wear a hooker out of it. But never happened. Never happened.
So, and you said to me when we were out for lunch today, you were talking to me about a bit of your history with being connected with kind of all the original guys, right?
Yeah.
The four guys. You want to just share that again with me, just so?
Well, I knew them all. I knew the late Rennie DeHinden. I knew the late Grover Krantz. I knew the late John Green. I knew the late John Bindernagel. I knew the late Robert Titmus. And one of my achievements, as I like to say, is I managed to be friends and do research with all these guys, and I never got sucked into their personal wars, because half the time you couldn't get them in the same room together. They despised each other so much. You know, I go out and Renee would say, so what does that Titmus say about this or that? You know, and I just look at him and say, Renee, I'm not telling you. I won't tell you what he said, and I won't tell him what you said. I know he didn't like it, but he tolerated it. I love the late Rennie DeHinden, and I like to say he loved me sometimes.
That's good, yeah. So so the important message on that is internal BF stuff has been going on since the beginning.
Of all the original guys who I didn't do any really research with was Peter Byrne. We exchanged letters and a few phone calls, but other than that, not much. And I think it's just because he's way down there in Oregon, and most of the other guys couldn't stand him. And I don't think he liked them either. So it's like I said, I never got sucked in their personal wars. I wouldn't. And for some reason, the others didn't hold it against me. They'd hold it against everybody else, but they didn't hold it against me. Don't know why. Now I am one of the old guys, and I never, ever, ever thought I'd hear that. Yeah. Time's going by.
Yeah, hopefully you won't be one of the late ones. That's the good thing.
I've written 4 books. The first one was called The Sasquatch in Alberta. It was published in 1990, and it's been out of print for decades. You ever find one? That's that yellow book up there. You ever find one, you keep it. But Hancock House, I just signed the contract.
Nice.
Right here, to have that book republished this summer.
Sweet.
And I've updated it because, of course, I stayed on in Alberta for years after that book was published, and I didn't leave Alberta until 2002, so there's a lot of stuff added to the book, so it'll be coming out this summer. And after that was the continuing mystery book, the black one there. Remember how I was describing what I thought I saw in 2004?
Yep.
The cover of that book kind of portrays it. That's basically what I saw, a black figure like that. But no, that's not based on the sighting, because the sighting happened in 2004. That book was published in 93. And of course, In Search of Giants came out in 2000. And since then, I co-authored 2 titles with Chris Murphy called Meet the Sasquatch, which came out in 2004, and The Sasquatch in British Columbia, which came out in 2012. And that's the long history of me and this ongoing mystery, and I'm still at it. Still at it.
Is it addicting?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. If you're interested in this kind of thing, you gotta be interested in this kind of thing, or don't get involved because it'll drive you crazy. You know, you have to deal with the asylum being taken over by inmates, which is what I like to call the Sasquatch community today, because the vast majority are, you know, people who associate the Sasquatch with UFOs, the fourth dimension, hobgoblins, this, that, and everything else. I mean, it's incredible. All the garbage that's on the internet, which is really a soapbox for every snake oil salesman out there. Yeah. And, you know, you just got to keep your mind clear, and like I said, I always say, stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts. Okay?
How do people find you? Because you've done like hundreds of interviews with people, right?
Yeah.
So is it because of your number that you've got on your vehicle there? Because on his vehicle,
that has resulted in a few. I guess word of mouth. People have seen my books. People get reference to me. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems. A witness wants to find someone to tell something like this, and like I said, the field today is more asylum being run by inmates, so they get in contact with somebody they see on the internet, and they're immediately told, like, well, I think you saw something that just came out of the fourth dimension and was materialized in front of me. Like, I put it down. Or they get sucked in, as simple as that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm well known in this. So if someone sees Sasquatch, they find out about me and they tell me about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're definitely one of the people that kind of, like, especially because you know John so well and all the other guys very well too. You guys were very kind from a very scientific approach. Right?
We were the kind of like the old guard. It's a reality guard. We're a zoological approach.
Right.
We didn't get curtailed off to the weird and the wonderful. But no, back in those days, we had our share of lunatics too. The king of the lunatics, a man named John Eric Beckchard, or as he was known on the BFF site, the man who could not be named. He was absolutely crazy. He'd phone me up at 3 a.m, pretending to be some professor. He was just crazy. Nice guy, but nuts. Absolute nuts. And then we had a lot of research of suffering from what I politely referred to as the Ivan Marks syndrome.
Which is?
Well, Ivan Marks is the first example of this I know. Someone who's the center, has something that maybe comes across something that's authentic, and he's the center of attention for a while, but that attention dies down, and the attention turned out was more important than the subject itself.
No.
So they do what they have to do to remain the center of attention. The most recent example of that I'm aware of, in my opinion, is one Todd Standing. The only difference between him and all the others before him that suffer from Ivan Marks syndrome is he seems to have money to spend. Yeah. So I personally do not believe a word he says. But that is my opinion. Others disagree with me.
When I was out talking to John Bindernagel last year, I asked him kind of to, I said to him, hey John, what are 3 things that make you believe Sasquatches are real from his own kind of personal perspective? And I'm just kind of curious about your own. What would be kind of 3? Could be 2, 1, doesn't really matter.
Well, I think what convinced me most of all was a set of tracks I came across in 1986 that I don't think could have been fake. I can't say with 100% certainty they couldn't have, but I don't believe they were. Because that was the best track finding I was ever involved in. It's listed as the Chilliwack River find, but it's actually a place called Ballbeard Creek. And this American couple claimed this large gorilla-like thing stole a stringer of fish from their camp. When they watched it cross the main road between the public campground, the recreation, and Ballbeard Creek on the other side of the road, which back then in 1986 was still a dirt road. It's paved now, but it was a dirt road then. And they never went across to see where it went or look at the area where it went. I caught them just as they were leaving, and I got the whole story from them. And then I went across, and I'm the one that found the tracks. And up to that point, I think that was the only time a researcher, including John Green, Rennie Dean, and Robert Titmus, I'm not sure about Robert Titmus, but others, every time they found tracks, because someone else found them first and told them about it. This was the first time I think I was the first one that ever was informed of a sighting. I went and looked, and I found the tracks where the witness didn't know they were there. And there were about 112 of these impressions all around Ballbeard Creek. Most of them, some of them rather more distinct down in the creek banks, but others that were just like marks in the grass. And it almost looked like it was meandering around at a certain point, as though like a man who dropped his keys and trying to find them. And I suspect, judging by what I was told happened, the scenario of the incident, that perhaps it had stopped and was looking to see if it was being followed. And then they went off, and the tracks disappeared at the edge of an old rock slide at Ford Mountain, where some of these rocks were the size of small buildings. And I never found where the trail came out after that. And I never found the stringer either, of the fish stringer, so it could still be lying out there somewhere. But was that incident, more than anything, that convinced me I'm not giving up on this.
How long, so when was that?
1986.
And when did you start?
1978.
So up to that, almost 10
About
years.
8 years, yeah, 8 years. Yeah.
8 years, and that's the one that kind of finally you got to the point when you said,
This is where I told my ex-wife, I'm not giving up on this. I'm not, the Sasquatch's not going out the door, you are. And that's what happened. That was it.
That's crazy
Yeah.
stuff. So you definitely believe it's flesh and blood.
I think we're dealing with a primate.
Okay.
A higher primate of some kind. I tend to go along with the hypothesis of Gigantopithecus blacki, which is a huge Asian ape that supposedly, possibly crossed the Bering Strait land bridge during the last ice age. At the same time, the ancestors of our First Nation people did. And Sasquatch is simply this species continuing. I could be convinced I'm wrong on that, but to me, that's the one that makes the most sense. Yeah, that's the one that makes the most sense.
When you saw those tracks, did you cast them by chance? Or?
I cast one. I cast two. This is where I learned that you have to let plaster pairs dry. Because this wasn't the first time I saw tracks, but it was the first time I actually tried to cast any. And I learned firsthand, you got to give them at least an hour. You know, even though the box says 15 minutes, give it an hour. Because that first cast I pulled out, it crumbled. And I thought, oh, so after about an hour and a half of cruising, I think I left that second track there. I spent 3 days there, so I left that track in there a good 2 hours before I pulled up, at least an hour. This is the footprint of Bald Bear Creek. That's right up, that's out of the ground. That's how I got it.
Really? Do you want to just hold that up for a second?
Sure.
So how long is that one?
Just under 18 inches.
18 inches. And when you found it, I'm gonna just pull this right off here, I think. When you found it, did you smile from ear to ear?
I was, no, to tell you the honest truth, I was more or less spellbound, you know, because after looking, this is this is where I was convinced, yes, there's something to this. There's something to this. This is not a hoax. There's got to be something to this, and I wasn't going to give up on it. And believe me, at the time, as I said, my ex-wife was giving me strong pressure to not devote so much time on this subject, but to concentrate on more important things. And after finding these tracks and everything, I said no.
And did you show John Bindernagel these ones?
Oh yeah,
He's 100%.
Yep. Green. Yep. Made a copy of it for Jeff Meldo.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's huge, eh?
Oh yeah.
Like
Americans picked a good name when they named it Bigfoot, that's for sure. But I like ours better, Chad. Tell you some tracks you'll find. You've heard of mid-tarsal break, right?
Yep.
Well, here's one of the footprints from the Patterson Gimlin film. And it's got probably the best example of a mid-tarsal break I've ever seen. Right? That was known as the track. It was photographed by Lyle Laverty. You see in the ground, it looks like there's a stick sticking out of it.
Right.
Twig there. And it was Robert Titmus that actually cast this track 9 days later when he cast 10 tracks in succession. Roger Patterson, the day he shot the film, only cast 2. One left foot, one right foot, and he picked the ones closest to the water to do.
Right.
Yeah. And it was Titmus who went down there 9 days later and cast this one.
How big is that one again?
14.5 inches long.
And the other one was?
18 inches long.
So
I mean, there's overflow here. Like,
yeah,
right when Titmus poured it, he overflowed it here. The toes, top of the toes are actually here. All right.
Yeah, you can see the indent right there, eh?
Mm-hmm.
You can just see why people, when they look at things, like I was talking once about tracking, and and I said to people, you know, the problem with big tracks is your brain's not wired to look for big tracks.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, like John, when he showed me one of his tracks, and there's a hiker footprint right in the middle of the track.
Yeah, well, that's just someone stepped on it.
Yeah, because we're just not used to looking at it. You can definitely see the toes in there too, eh?
See, here's a copy of one of the tracks that Patterson cast the day of the film. The foot that made this track made this one about 14 steps later.
Wow.
All right? The same foot made these two casting. What a difference.
Yeah, you can see how they match too.
And how much variance is there. Now, if someone's walking around with fake feet on their feet, that's been suggested time and time again, it'd be cookie cutter. Everything would be the same. So, unless they got 15 different carvings they're changing out of.
Right.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, because you've seen tracks a lot more than I have, the metatarsal break that you have here, mid-tarsal break, sorry, compared to not seeing it here, your idea would be that this was in what, tougher ground, softer ground?
It's moving.
And this is just a stationary one.
This is a Roger being Roger. He picked what he thought were the clearest, most distinct prints. So he picked the ones down closest to the water's edge when they first encountered the animal.
Right. Yeah.
Right. When she started walking away and striding out, as she's picking up speed, you get this. The heel comes down, then the forefoot sort of pushes a mound of dirt up, toes come down, lift off, and when the foot's off the ground, it's almost like on a 45-degree angle, almost like a person when they cross-country ski.
Right.
Right, when she's stepping.
Yep.
And you get that mound of dirt pushed up, and that's what they call the mid-tarsal break. When you're human, we get it right in behind the toes, because we don't have a mid-tarsal break. And this is probably what most anthropologists would argue is an excellent adaptation for a bipedal barefooted animal that lives in mountain country. The mid-tarsal break.
Yeah, to negotiate.
I always thought mid-tarsal break was kind of a bad name. I always thought it should be called a mid-tarsal bend, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To us lay people, that would make more sense to it.
And of course, back then, they didn't even think of stuff like that.
Wow. How many casts do you have altogether?
I don't know. I lost count.
So if you were to speculate for yourself, talking 20?
Yeah, somewhere around there, I guess. Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Some have cast myself, some are copies. Yeah.
And I kind of asked you about, you know, because a lot of people like to interview eyewitnesses, and your most impressed eyewitness account that you got to actually interview somebody was, would you mind explaining that story a bit?
Crandall Campground. So it's the Crandall Campground incident. Occurred in the Crandall Campground of Waterton Lakes National Park in the May long weekend of 1988. There were two couples, Susan and Scott Stoness, who were married at the time. They are not any longer. And another couple who were just dating then and are now married and have a platoon of kids. Darwin Gillis and Sharon Sanko. Now they're at C3 Crandall Campground when playing cards, and there was indication that something was not quite right, because at one point the cards blew off the table when a burst of wind came up, and they thought they heard a type of whistling noise back in the bush, but they weren't really sure or made anything out of that. And Susan said, I wonder where all the deer have gone, because you ever been to Crandall Campground in Waterton Lakes National Park? There's almost always deer around, and elk eating out of people's hand. That's how tame they are, right? How used to people they are. And she noticed all the deer are gone. Well, as time rolled on and it was getting later, the Stonesses, Susan and Scott, decided to go down the public trail to the public washrooms to brush their teeth before they turned in. The other couple were going to stay back at camp for a little while, and they're still going to eat potato chips, whatever. And as they were going down, about halfway to the public campground, there was this dark figure, large dark figure, that was standing on the trail between them and the washrooms. And it was almost getting to the point where they were almost going to walk into it, and it let out a snorting grunt noise at them. The way Darwin described it, it's like a bull when it blows out a lot of air. And Susan, being a nervous, scared type of night, she immediately yelled, "Holy blank, 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 that's a blank, blank, blank bear." And she pulled away from her husband, went running back to the campsite, which is not the thing you should do if you encounter a bear. And Scott, he kept his cool, and he slowly backed up, he kept his eye out, and he just saw a dark shape move off the trail to the left. And when he got back down, the other people were in the car. He tried to get into the car beside his wife, but she had locked the door and she wouldn't let him in. I guess somebody had to be sacrificed. And he ended up getting in the car with the other woman, Sharon. Well, they turned on the headlights of one of their cars. They didn't see anything. They turned on the headlight of the others, and this thing, whatever it was, just walked through the area illuminated by the lights. The lights weren't on 2 seconds before the thing, so they just caught it as it was going. And it seemed to be going off at an angle through the trees toward Blackstone Brook and out of the campground. And all four witnesses were amazed that they see something between 7 and 8 feet tall, covered in hair, very, very, very solid looking, but not as big and thick in the hip area and stuff as photos I showed them of the PG film. And so later on, they were the guests. They had no idea the gender of the thing they saw, but they assumed it was a male. Well, after it moved through Darren Gillis, he was very excited. He knew what it was. He said, you know, that is a blank, blank, blank Sasquatch. So the two men wanted to start up the vehicles and go driving around and see if they could see it again. The two women wanted nothing to do with that. Matter of fact, Susan wanted to pack up and head back to Calgary right away. But they managed to calm her down. So after a while, they got into one car and they started moving around through the campground. And they came across a pickup truck that would also seem to be driving back and forth all the way through the campground. And they flashed their lights at each other and came to a stop. And it turned out these three people had seen something strange and were trying to see it again too. So it may be a case here of 7 witnesses rather than 4.
Yeah.
So they all went back to camp after not seeing anything. They never did see it again. And poor Susan, she was so scared, she stayed wide awake sitting in the car all night long. They all basically stuck to the cars. They didn't go back to the tents. But all the rest went to sleep. And Susan was there. And she said just before dawn, she was sitting there scared as hell. And she started feeling better because just before dawn she noticed the deer were back. So she felt it was safe now. And they all insisted that, yeah, we're going to report this to the park warden's office. So they went into the park warden's office and they talked to Warden Alan Dipp, who I later talked to as well. And he told me he did everything he could to try and convince these people, oh, you know, you probably saw a bear standing out begging for food, whatever, the same old story, but they wouldn't have nothing of it. And Darren Gillis insisted on making a written report. And I'm sure that report is still on file in the park warden's office. I have a copy of it here, I'll show it to you. But the one thing that bothers me about this case, I did interview all 4 witnesses separately. I did visit the site many times over the years before I moved away. And everything seems to fit. The only thing that bothers me is who were the 3 people in the other truck.
Oh, because you couldn't get a hold of them.
I couldn't find out who they were and was never able to track them down. Even put an ad in the paper for a little while, but they never heard who they were. I don't even know if they were camping there or they were just driving through. But part of me thought, were these 3 people who pulled off a hoax of some kind, were just hanging around to see if they'd been successful?
Yep.
You know, that's a possibility. But our main witnesses said if this was a guy in a suit, it was the best makeup job Hollywood ever did. Yeah.
Did you ever get called out to report and then later on kind of find out that it was obviously someone was trying to hoax?
Yeah, and one of the worst ones I ever did. I got called all the way out to Lake Louise, or as we call it now, Todd Standing Country. And I drove into the campground there after someone said something was wandering through the campsites, and I saw a lady in a white gorilla costume with the mask off, walking a cat on a leash. I think she was. I was about an hour early, so I said I'd be there. So I think it was a horrible costume, pure white. But if she didn't have the head part, I would say it was probably a cheap Easter Bunny outfit.
Right.
But it wasn't. It was a gorilla outfit. It was jet white. She had taken off the head, was walking her cat. I came in and there's this woman in a gorilla costume walking a cat.
That's crazy.
So after giving them a blast about wasting my time, I kind of saw the humor in it. I am convinced that the Hoover Lake incident was either a case of mistaken identity or a deliberate hoax attempt. Because I found out not only was it a man, I know his name, Brandon Pollock, and he said he was on that island or outcropping in that lake collecting firewood. And if they had just hung around for a little while, they would have seen him get into his rowboat, which was apparently just down the beach line away, out of sight behind the trees from the camera position, so they didn't see it, or they did it on purpose. They would have seen him get in that rowboat and row back across the lake, which he was collecting firewood. He was wearing a dark hoodie. He was wearing dark blue cargo pants, and he was carrying a black backpack. And the man is 6'3", so he's quite tall.
Right.
They said that was me they filmed. And so it's like I said, if they intentionally had edited that video when it appeared on YouTube just so you wouldn't see the rowboat and stuff, well, then that's a hoax. If they really thought it was a Sasquatch, they were just mistaken. It was a man.
But I think when you're talking about
extremely
that too,
far away.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you got a view like that,
Yeah.
and you can see something on an island like that, why does it stop the camera shot?
Yeah.
Especially at the end of it. Like,
Yeah, I wouldn't have left. I would have tried to see it for a while.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so
they can only go one
more
way.
likely,
Back
more
into the
likely
water,
a hoax attempt.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like the second video from the missionary here that came up at the same time with the Asian tourist snapping pictures of a Sasquatch in the bush, acting like a nonchalant black bear in Yellowstone Park. Well, not only do I know the people who released these videos, claiming they were sent to them anonymously, were trying to start up a cell phone program called Legend Tracker, which is a program for your cell phone. If you're in an area, you could punch the area in and all the cryptozoological incidents would come up. They had contacted, I met the man a year before any of this happened at the Kilby Museum because I was doing a display there for their Legends of BC Day. And he was telling me about it, and I think he was kind of hinting of helping him out a bit, but I got uneasy. I felt, it sounds like you know, I don't care what you call it or what it is, it's hoaxing. You know, and I won't participate in any hoaxing, you know. I told him right then and there, there's enough possibly true stuff. You don't need to make stuff up. I never heard from him again for a while. And then these two films came out, and I went, oh, it's Legend Tracker. Yeah, it's these guys. And then I found out from a man I know who's the director of tourism in Harrison Hot Springs. He told me he was contacted by a Legend Tracker and asked where he could get a costume like the one they used in town for their Sasquatch Day celebration. It was about, you'd see him in the Sasquatch apron. And he not only said, yeah, I know you can get it, but you give me the money, I'll order one for you, and I'll pick it up for you, not knowing what he's going to use it for. And so they got their hands on this costume. And I'm convinced that the so-called Sasquatch in the Asian tourist video is some guy wearing this suit fooling a bunch of Asian tourists, you know, because you see them all snapping pictures. I can't believe. And I think the same costume was used in a funny real estate and used car commercial in the missionary at the same time. So, because the big is they used a very common suit, which is seen over and over and over again. Yeah. I can show you a dozen pictures of it here. Yeah.
I posted a challenge to people a couple of weeks ago online, and one of the challenge, I posted a challenge of if you were looking for Sasquatch and you had all the resources that you possibly could have to get them on film, what do you think those would be? What would you need, do you think?
What would I need?
Yeah. Without, like, thinking out of the box.
You know, I hate to say this, but it doesn't matter how clear a video or a photograph is. That's not going to convince the world that the Sasquatch exists. What's going to convince the world that the Sasquatch exists is when science gets what science has always demanded. They need a body or a piece of the body. Nothing else will do. Or sufficient skeletal remains.
I remember John Green was talking about, he said the same thing. He said the bottom line is, if you want to protect them and protect their habitat, one's going to have to be sacrificed.
Yeah, and needless to say, if they're so low in number that killing one could terminate the species, well, they're doomed anyway. It's going to happen sooner or later. But that's one of the biggest problems, like everything else in this society of ours, or social engineered left-wing society of ours. You got to be politically correct all the time, and that's about as politically incorrect as you can get.
Right.
Reality is reality, and whether your politically correct mind wants to accept it or not, that's what has to be. But could I shoot one if I actually saw one? No. Probably not. I'd probably be just happy that I was right and let the rest of the world go to hell. You can believe it or not. I don't care. I don't care. I gave up caring whether or not the public believes in the Sasquatch a long time ago. I'm just trying to find evidence. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Look, and if you got, I deal with a lot of people who are just kind of starting out this whole thing, and I think you did some good advice. Well, one good thing that you said too was, when we were talking about a bit about those guys that might have been that were hoaxing that missions thing there, and you said what was the first rule of law for?
There's one golden rule to anyone who wants to get involved in researching the Sasquatch question, and that law is thou shalt not hoax for any reason. Never hoax, never participate in hoax, never promote a hoax. Matter of fact, the biggest part of your job is not only trying to find evidence of the existence of the Sasquatch, you're trying to find evidence for its non-existence as well. A researcher has got to be someone who is willing to admit that they could be wrong. After 40 years in this now, and that's about right, I think 39, 40 years in 78, I have to be willing to accept that I may be chasing, I don't believe it, but I accept the possibility that I may be just chasing mythology and folklore. Very important Western North American mythology and folklore, which alone makes it worth looking into and collecting. But you have to accept that possibility because I'm a researcher. You have to accept the negative along with the positive. A lot of these people nowadays, especially nowadays, and like I always said, inmates running the asylum, they're not really researchers.
Yeah.
They're advocates. They're like religious leaders pushing a faith. They're already convinced, and they feel it's their job to convince everybody else.
Right.
No. You're trying to find an answer to a question, not push a faith. And that's what a researcher is and should be.
Yeah, and you totally buy that they're out there, though, right?
Right now, the evidence has convinced me that there is a large unclassified primate in the wilderness areas of Western North America. Maybe even more parts of North America. I was, until about the mid-90s to the late 90s, I was basically totally convinced anything in the eastern part of the continent had to be nonsense. But then
Why was that?
Well, I couldn't understand, especially, not so much in Canada, but in the United States where the population is so big and the wilderness areas are so depleted that if there's something like this existed there, other than some extreme areas like the Sulphur River bottoms around Fouke, Arkansas, where, the Fouke Monster and the Skunk Ape and Florida and the Everglades, I just couldn't see how such a creature could possibly exist. Then I got to see those areas myself and looked into the work done by good researchers in the East, like, Don Keating and people like that who look and stick to the facts and every day facts attitude like I always have.
Yeah. And
I was looking at their stuff and I couldn't deny it. I mean, it sounds good. I mean, and I got to tour some areas. I mean, I couldn't believe the Pine Barrens in New York. This area is just a couple hours outside New York City, and yet you could get as lost in there as you could anywhere here. It's immense. I grew up in northern Ontario, so I know Ontario's got more tracts of forest than even British Columbia does. But in the United States, I figured, they've either cut it all down and built cities on it, or it's another Europe.
Yep.
Their idea of wilderness is a patch of trees between towns.
Yep.
No, towns are little spots in great big hunks of wilderness. It's the other way around. So it's possible the Sasquatch could exist in the East. I don't deny it now, but it does strike me as odd that we were talking about it out here for decades before really anything in the East really got going.
Yeah, it's definitely more accepted.
Yeah.
Especially in BC.
Yeah.
As far as it goes, the idea, even the idea of it tickles people's imaginations. So.
Yeah, and they got so many folk legends and local stories, and there's so many stories in each. Three-toed tracks, six-toed tracks, web-toed tracks. Where here in the Pacific Northwest, it was always the same.
Yep.
Everything was always uniform. A large ape-like creature standing 8 feet tall, walks upright like a man, and it has 5-toed tracks. Rather human-like in appearance until you take a real good look at them.
Yeah. In your opinion, one of the problems, of course, is I got a certain group of people that have said to me that they've got seems to be a lot of activities, sightings, difficulty filming them, and then I have other ones who believe that they're kind of they have an area kind of like a mountain lion would have, which is 100 miles, and they kind of do the circuit. Is that kind of your zone too on that?
I don't think they're territorial or anything.
You just think they just meander through the forest?
There's been a lot of instances, like small communities, like just down the road here, Dudney, DeRoche, where there hasn't been sightings for years, and all of a sudden, for a period of 4, 5, 6, 7 days, a number of people have sightings. So one had moved into the area, hung around for a while, and then moved on.
Yeah, that's a kind of a common thing too. I've heard before too. Yeah.
And I always wondered if the Sasquatch, and this is assuming it does exist, I always assume you probably have family groups with, of course this is absolute speculation on my part, but it makes sense assuming the animal exists, and if certain stories like the Albert Osman story and stuff like that turn out to be real. One dominant male and a number of females. And that dominant male tolerates the presence of female young and will tolerate the presence of male young until the males get so big. Then he drives them away. And they go off on their own and getting bigger, getting stronger. And that's basically what people are seeing most of the time. These males who either have not had the chance to take over a family group themselves, or older dethroned dominant males who go back to that nomadic lifestyle when they're driven away themselves by a younger, stronger male who takes over.
Right.
And you know, and if he's lucky enough not to get killed by it in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
That's why I think people are seeing these great tip ones and things like that. That's probably what they are. But this is all hypothesis on my part.
Yeah, yeah.
Assuming the creature does exist, but it does make sense because usually most of the time gender isn't noticed, but and when it is, it's usually female because they see large hair-covered mammary glands or breasts.
Yeah.
You know, very very rarely is male genitalia noticed, and if it is, well, they say they're not giants in all respects. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I had one of the great Ivan Mark syndrome type fellows here here in the Lower Mainland, up in Maple Ridge, just up the road here. I won't mention his name, just his initials. Randy Brisson. One of his giveaways, and the sign that made me suspicious is he said it had a schlong that basically went from where it connects to the body almost all the way down to the feet. So.
I think that would be kind of painful.
Yeah.
At least in the Pacific.
Yeah, so there's something wrong there.
Yeah.
But
if you were to help somebody looking for this thing, what was your first piece of advice, maybe second piece of advice, and third?
Don't go anywhere at any time ever without a camera in your hand. You're in a public campground, you have to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, go to the outhouse, take your camera with you. Always have your camera with you. Always. And I know the one time I may have saw something, I had a camera with me, and I didn't get a picture of it. It was over so damn fast. Because a researcher, no matter how good he is or how reliable he is, he's still a human being, and there's going to be that few seconds of before we react. And the thing I saw in 2004, it was gone before I even had a chance to bring my Land Rover, which was while I was driving then, to a halt and get the camera, which was sitting right on the seat right beside me out. The only thing I have is a man named John Miles, who I was taking up. He lives up at 20 Mile, and he saw it too. I just looked at him, did you see that? He said, yes, I did. And that's the only confirmation I ever had.
Was he the one that was interviewed on Red Earth, or is that a different fellow?
No. John Miles was not on Red Earth. No, he's not. Well, he does a little bit of research because he basically got interested because we were interested in him. Because he's had a number of strange that's happened up there because he lives up there over the years, and we've looked into. But he claims a couple of sightings himself. And the funny thing is, I talked to him years later. On the one he was the co-witness with me, his memory of it is a little different than mine.
Oh.
Yeah. Which is interesting. Like I said, human memory plays strange tricks.
Yes, it does.
You go to a place after you've been away for 20 years, you can't believe how small it is. You know, It seemed so big to you before. You know, that kind of thing. Or something you saw, you think, like a certain. Someone told me a story very recently about seeing a young Sasquatch jumping all over a moose in a lake on the Trans-Canada Highway, and who knows, maybe that was a young Sasquatch harassing a moose, or maybe as a kid he saw an otter or something going all over a moose, and you know, if you see a thing at a certain angles peeping around and things like that, it could appear to be something like that.
Could.
You know, the memory is strange tricks. The human being plays a lot of tricks on people, but then again, maybe it was a Sasquatch, because I've seen video of bear cubs playing with baby deer, and you know, mountain lions cavorting with bears. They would normally, you think they'd tear each other apart. Cats and dogs living together, total chaos. Yeah.
What about, have you heard any vocals yourself personally?
I've heard a lot of strange noise, but to me, my opinion on that is a noise in the woods is just that, a noise in the woods. If you didn't see what did it, you basically just got another mystery in your hands.
So that's the kind
there
of
could be other explanations for it.
Right.
You ever heard a mountain lion, a real mountain lion go off at a certain time? They don't sound anything like the old Disney nature films we used to watch growing up. It'll unnerve you. A screech owl will make you jump out of your skin. There are a lot of strange things out there. Sasquatch will obviously make noise. People report everything from loud piercing whistles to like a woman screaming and stuff. I've heard a lot of strange noises out there. I can't say Sasquatch didn't do it, but like I said, stick defects every defects. I heard a noise. I did not see what made it. There was a famous sound that has been through. A lot of my colleagues got mad at me for this. Don't know if you remember it, but in 2004 we were hot on the trail. It was first reported to John Green, and John passed it on to me. There was a couple living up here behind near the Chehalis Reserve in the trailer park there on the Chehalis Flats, and something was making these strange high-pitched crying calls out on the flats at night, and they couldn't see it. And John suggested to him, well, next time it happens, put your camcorder out. He said, well, it's pitch dark, you won't see it. Yeah, but at least we'll hear what you're talking about. And we did. And we got immediately interested because they were sounds exactly like the famous Puyallup recordings.
Oh,
Yeah, from 69, 70. The Chehalis recordings from 1979, the Klamath River recordings from 1993, that I would have bet money on would probably be Sasquatch, proven to be Sasquatch in origin someday. I believe they were, because I couldn't figure out what else it could be. Well, Jerry Matthews and I, following up on these strange sounds, we're out in the flats, April 9th, 2004. Early in the morning, we heard the sounds. We said, this is it. We're going to see what's making them. And we went right across the flats, chased that sound, and we did. It was a coyote.
Oh, no.
It looked like invisible hands were squeezing this coyote's guts when it let out these incredible cries. And I have been around coyotes my whole life, and I thought I knew every sound they made. Hell, when I was in Water Valley, Alberta, we used to sit up in the night in the porch and listen to them. It's like a serenade going up all over the place. A coyote. And when a second coyote came bounding out of the bush, they both reverted back to that familiar yip, yip, yipping type noise we've all heard a million times, and they went off like two happy puppies jumping all over each other, and off they went. And what I think it is a rarely heard location cry, letting another coyote knows where it is, And people are, when I announced this, and of course, when I announced it, I said, that means, in my mind, as far as I am concerned, we've also explained the way the Puyallup recordings in 1969-70, the Chehalis recordings in 1979, and the Klamath recordings in 1993. They're probably coyote, this rare coyote call. Yeah. And people, especially people who use these sounds in their so-called call blasting, did not want to hear that.
Yeah.
John Freitas and guys like that, guys I know and I like and I think do good work, they were so pissed that they heard that. They were attacking. Oh, you don't know it was a coyote. I said, yes, you did. I saw a coyote making it. Did you video the coyote making it? I said, well, no, but you think I'm lying? Which struck me as odd. I said, you're willing to believe a Sasquatch did, but you won't believe a coyote did, which is strange to me. But there you go.
Yeah. Well, even cougars. Like, cougars can make some...
Oh, it's incredible.
Porcupines, as strange as this sounds, porcupines having sex, you would never put the sound of porcupines having sex with a porcupine.
Yeah.
Because it's just a bizarre, weird
Moose
sound.
during the rut.
Like,
what a weird noise that is. If I heard that, I was wondering... incredible noises. And if you didn't see what did it, it's just a noise. Half the time in the United States when they go on these call blasting, the first thing you got to do is make sure there was no other group call blasting within 2 miles. Because the outside they're just calling back to each other. So that's why going out and howling at the moon and stuff I don't give much credence to, and I don't do it. I don't go out hammering on trees. I don't buy that either.
Right.
And someone hears you bang on a tree, they're going to bang back.
What about like twisted trees and stuff like that?
Well, twisted trees, the twisted tree theory, I remember when that started. A late friend of mine, Robert Gimlin, or Bob Gimlin as he's well known, he passed away in the 1990s. He first proposed that in the mid-1960s. He said he couldn't explain these broken off trees, young trees he was finding all over Northern California. And he just suggested, do you think Sasquatch has something to do with this, or Bigfoot, as the American term is? It was never ever established. It was just a theory. But through time and retelling and people finding other things and stories being told and this and that and that, well, in the late 1970s, I noticed almost every film documentary was saying twisted trees was a marker left by Sasquatch. Well, that was never established. It was just a question. But someone coming in today thinks it's established for us. The same thing goes with shelters and tree structures and stick graphs and all this stuff. People are accepting it as though it's established fact, when it's just an hypothesis that someone was asking. I have seen all this stuff. What I have not seen is any evidence whatsoever that Sasquatch has anything to do with it. You know? And unless I see a Sasquatch in a shelter or something like that, to me there could be other explanations for it. You know? Hunters build blinds all the time. Poachers build blinds. And they don't tell people about them because they want to reuse them, and of course they're poaching, you know. All kinds of things. The military, I mean, up Burnt Timber Creek in Alberta, I remember finding these things that looked like weird shelters. Wait a minute. I remember when I was in, we used to come out in this area to do survival training. I built stuff like this. So I went out, oh yeah, we were there. Why, did you find a shelter? Yeah. Where'd you find? I said, well, am I getting somebody in trouble? Because they're not supposed to leave any sign they were there.
Oh, right. Yeah.
They should have taken the shelter down.
Wow.
You know, troops are going out there to do their survival training. That's what I was finding. You know, group of people on the internet there telling me, how do you explain this? And then we didn't find any signs of people except some old booth that had been there for 15 years. It was all rotted away. Well, you're one up in the Sasquatch, you got evidence of people, the boot. You know? Yeah. Well, no one's ever been there. Well, you're there. You know, they always say we're in a spot no one's ever been to before. Well, then how did you get there?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking at the film there. You're 60 pounds overweight. You got there. How let me think no one else can.
Yeah.
You know.
So, Thomas, just kind of wrapping it up here, if you wanted to tell the viewer something, anything you wanted to share, what would that be about this whole thing?
If you want to get involved in Sasquatch research, I say all the power to you, because I still think the answer's out there. I still believe the things, but you got to adopt the philosophy I have lived with since the day I started, and that philosophy is quite simple: stick to the facts and never deviate from the facts. Okay? Stick to the facts, never deviate from facts. Don't assume anything, and don't go off on wild stories. If someone's telling you something that doesn't fit, well, you may have uncovered an attempted hoax. You know, you may have uncovered the sighting of something else. Because when you're interviewing a witness, there's only 3 possibilities. Number 1, they saw a Sasquatch. Number 2, they mistook someone or something for a Sasquatch. Or number 3, they're lying. And quite frankly now, with the internet and stuff, number 3 comes up more often than anything else. They're lying. It used to be when I started, you had to pry info from a witness, but with things like the internet and silly shows like Finding Bigfoot, I mean, you know as well as I do, there are a lot of programs on now, especially in the United States, that make Finding Bigfoot look like a Smithsonian special. The only way to describe them is Duck Dynasty meets Bigfoot. You know, they're just ridiculous. Yeah. It's made seeing a Sasquatch become trendy.
Yes.
You know, I've had people call me up and tell me their stories, and they want me to put them in contact with the show because they want to be on the show. Because I know those guys, right?
Yeah.
You know, when they were up here a number of years ago doing their BC thing, all the guys in the town hall meeting were guys from my files that I got together for them on that show. And then when the final show came out, I said, "Oh, you lying bastards." I said, "That didn't happen. They went to Hoover Lake, and it shows Matt and Cliff going down in the speedboat in Harrison Lake." And I said, well, if they took that to the dock in Hoover Lake, they had to portage that over a couple of kilometers of rocks and mountains because the lakes are not attached. You know? I said, why do you do that? You know, oh, it's for the show. Okay. And you always got to remember, the show is a show. You know, their goal is to justify another season. I mean, when the producers were up here and I was dealing with them, they told me quite honestly, the worst thing that can happen to us, we find Bigfoot.
Totally.
And they do things on that show that they wouldn't do in real life because the show demands it. Right. To their credit, they don't intentionally hoax stuff. Some of the background people were doing that in the first season. They put their foot down. A couple people got fired.
Yeah.
And you may remember an old episode where James Fay, or Bobo as he's called, takes a tumble on a. That's because someone in the back behind the camera threw an axe handle into the trees to make it sound like there was something there. You know, and just so they could get something exciting for the episode. But they put their foot down and said, no hoaxing. Thou shalt not hoax. Yeah, so. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you, Thomas.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
It was awesome to meet you.
More than welcome.
And I'm out this way. I'm going to stop in again. I hope that would be okay.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll take you for dinner.
Sure.
Thanks.
Well, we'll go out in the bush or something.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd do that 100%.
Yeah.
I'll throw a couple of axe handles and a few rocks. And I'll bring my coyote calls so that
okay.
Really do it. I appreciate it totally, 100%, Thomas.
No problem.
Okay. Thanks, man.
Nice meeting you. Yeah.